Welcome back to the Wilmington Chambers podcast. We've been having a lot of fun here while we've been getting prepared because that's what we like to do. We like to have fun while we live into our vision to promote prosperity by cultivating business growth. And a new business growth opportunity for North Carolina and for our region is offshore wind energy. So, Neil, why are we talking about offshore wind energy?
Well, primarily due to the potential economic impact of North Carolina and the entire United States, really, the East Coast. We're talking about several large utility-scale wind energy farms that could be located, constructed off of the East Coast. Two of those would be off of North Carolina's coast. And regardless of if it's off North Carolina or not, North Carolina is very well positioned to be heavily involved with the construction, fabrication, maintenance of these wind farms. We're centrally located on the East Coast, and North Carolina has the largest manufacturing base of any of the East Coast states that may be involved with these wind farms, their construction and maintenance.
Yeah, why offshore wind? It's an even bigger. You start with the need to minimize the carbon emissions, and the United States is committed to doing what we can to reduce those emissions. And one of the ways is to work away from the use of fossil fuels to heat our homes and turn our lights on. And so, wind energy, solar energy is an important part of that conversation. But I think we heard in a meeting recently, Neil, that it's like that without wind energy in the North Carolina portfolio, there's no way we can meet our goals by 2050 of 100% reduction in carbon gas emissions.
Yeah, I feel like as a chamber, we continue to talk about the diversification of the sources of how we get energy.
Right.
Talk to me about why that's important.
Well, it's important because so you can't rely completely on solar, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes the sun's not out.
Right.
So what happens when the sun goes down or when there goes a cloudy day? You can't produce enough energy. Again, solar is important because we do have a lot of sunny days in North Carolina, but having what they call in the utility industry an all of the above strategy, so that you are looking at all of those. So natural gas will continue to play a role. Nuclear energy will continue to play a role. Really what we're going to see is this long-time use of coal is what's being replaced with these other sources because burning coal does have such an impact on the environment.
So I guess my other question is, I feel like we've read different things about North Carolina's energy consumption, too, this mid-Atlantic consumption rate, because we're running our air conditioners a lot. We run our heat more often than in winter. Does that play a role in the conversation right now, too?
Well, the governor's office has said they want to generate 4.6 gigawatts of renewable power to power the air conditioners and the heaters and everything else that, the lights that we take for granted in our modern society. And the internet is powered, obviously, by electricity. So as Natalie mentioned previously, the only way to be able to meet that goal is to build some utility-scale wind farms offshore of North Carolina. And not only that, but the sites off of North Carolina have been designated as probably the most productive sites for offshore wind on the East Coast because of their locations, the meteorology associated with being in that particular area of the Atlantic. So, as Natalie said, the chamber believes in an all-the-above approach. If we're going to start reducing our burning of fossil fuels and emitting greenhouse gases, we have to look at solar, wind, nuclear, water sources, etc., in order to be able to meet those goals.
Yeah, absolutely. So Neil, how do you put a windmill out in the ocean?
Well, that's certainly a challenge for engineering, but it has been, that riddle has been solved. There are plenty of existing offshore wind farms, particularly that comes to mind to me because I've seen them myself is in Europe, and they have even worse weather conditions up there in the North Sea than we have in the Atlantic. Now, certainly hurricanes do visit us from time to time, but you're basically talking about a pretty substantial foundation that would go into the seafloor, and you're talking about a pretty substantial structure that gets you up above the top of the ocean before you then plant a windmill on top of that.
Right.
So it is something that can be done successfully, and it can be done to withstand the oceans and the high winds associated with hurricane activity.
And there are people who are rightly concerned about the impacts something like that could have in the ocean. There are federal and state agencies looking at that as they consider what our next steps should be, right?
The federal government has done a very thorough environmental study of any site that's being proposed for offshore wind. They look at whale migration paths. They look at sea turtle, activity. They look at shipping traffic. They look at what's on the seafloor in that area. So all of those different things are all taken into account before they recommend a certain site. That's why you're not envisioning a series of windmills from Miami to Manhattan, because not every site is going to meet that stringent environmental criteria. So there's also concerns about what the view of those would look like from the beach, and certainly that's a concern that's a legitimate concern. A lot of people come to North Carolina beaches and other beaches because they enjoy the view of an endless horizon, so to speak. And so they recently released some visualizations of what the closest wind farm to North Carolina's coast would look like. Wilmington East is the one they recently issued visualizations for. They were released in Southport a couple weeks ago. And in those visualizations on a normal summer day, if you can see them, you've got very good eyesight, if at all. I mean, it's really a very, very small speck on the horizon. And I kind of liken it to when electricity first was being distributed to North Carolina, and power poles and power lines, and a lot of, at the time people had concerns about how that was going to ruin your view of different areas. But now, no one notices a power pole or power line anymore. It's just become ubiquitous in some ways. Now, they are certainly more visually apparent to you because they're right in front of you as compared to these offshore wind towers that will be so far off the coast that, again, most people will never even spot them unless they are specifically looking for them.
So speaking of power poles, I have to tell you a funny story. I had the opportunity years ago to play golf with the president of Duke Power Company at the time was the name of the company. And there's a golf course in Charlotte where a power line goes directly across the 18th hole. So we're on the fairway, and it's bzz, bzz. You know how they sound when you're right under them. And one of our golf partners said, "That sounds really scary to me." And the president of Duke Power Company says, "Sounds like money to me."
So speaking of money, I guess I'm more thinking about the jobs side of things, the job opportunities. You're talking about building these windmills. There's got to be like 1 million pieces that we need to manufacture in North Carolina, and then maybe put out the port, Wilmington, and put them up. I mean, it feels like a huge opportunity for our community, for the state.
I think that's exactly right. I think there's so much potential, and obviously we always think about the large companies, the windmill. Wind turbine, I guess, is the technical term of manufacturers, the large OEMs. But even looking down at the micro level and the small business side, how much engineering, how much specialization goes into manufacturing all the parts and filling out the supply chain, and the boating industry that's needed to service and maintain and operate the windmills once they're in place. Wind turbines, I did it again. But I think that's the real bright side from my point of view on how we grow out the wind energy side. We obviously want some of the big projects, and those are going to be competitive, but also building out the supply chain and making sure that our small businesses in New Hanover County have an opportunity to get in on the ground floor.
Yeah.
I think it's fun that there are companies already in North Carolina that are going to get work, that will have to add jobs in order to respond to the supply need. There's a company in Huntersville, North Carolina, a small cabling company, and they've already gotten a contract to make cable for the wind turbines in the northeastern part of the country, and they've already had to expand in order to compete or to provide the product that's needed for those projects up in the northeastern part of the country. And so we already have offshore wind energy jobs in North Carolina, and it's exciting to think how some companies can pivot and make a new product line and grow from that.
Yeah.
And when that company expands, they have to, bring in contractors. They have to buy materials. They have to get materials from their suppliers in order to build their cables. So it really does ripple through the entire economy, and it's something that can really make a huge difference over the next 20, 30 years for North Carolina economy. Not just for Wilmington, but the entire state of North Carolina can have a huge benefit if we are able to move forward with these offshore wind areas.
Absolutely, and we're well positioned from a workforce perspective with programs currently in the Coastal Engineering Program at University of North Carolina, Wilmington, the Center for Marine Science at UNCW, and then the Marine Tech programs that are at Cape Fear Community College. So we're well positioned to help to create and provide that workforce for those jobs.
So what comes next, I guess?
Well, the Chamber has issued a position that we're in favor of continuing to explore the development of these offshore wind areas, and that we support the state's efforts to grow clean energy technology and the jobs associated with that technology. So the Chamber of Commerce is advocating in any way we can to continue exploring these options and hopefully be able to move forward with the federal government moving forward with opening up the Wilmington East area for a lease for energy companies to bid on building an offshore wind farm on those particular tracks.
And so while we're advocating, the Bureau of Energy Management, BOEM, is also evaluating, right? They're continuing to look at public comments that they've received with regard to these specific lease areas, and they will issue, I guess, a ruling of theirs as to when and how they'll move forward with these possible lease areas. And there's an expectation that the leases will go to auction as early as May.
Wow.
So we're talking now. We won't see wind turbines
Yeah.
next
Everything
summer,
takes a while.
but yeah, that's how quickly we could get to work on this.
That's great. That's exciting.
One other concern that we've heard are from people who, commercial fishermen or recreational fishermen, about how are these turbines going to impact their business. And, anecdotally, in areas that have built turbines off the coast, they've actually seen an increase in marine life and habitat out there that's attracted fish. And again, anecdotally, anytime you have structure out in the ocean, typically you are going to be attracting marine life. And that's why right now we intentionally, sink wrecks off the coast and put other material out there on the bottom to create structure for recreational, for scuba divers, for other, encouraging that marine life to concentrate in those areas. And I personally believe that the wind turbine foundations will do a similar role. Same thing with the oil derricks off the coast in the Gulf of Mexico. All the fishermen go straight to those oil towers when they want to go fishing because it's created, that additional habitat.
Right. Right. Any other things that people? We've talked about the visualizations. We've talked about fish and wildlife habitats. Are there any other concerns that people are bringing up with regard to this possibility?
I think the only other outstanding question I can think of right now is where is that power line going to come ashore? There's going to be a lot of electricity being generated by these things, and so there's got to be a cable that's coming ashore somewhere, and that's yet to be determined.
Right.
I'm confident that just like their environmental assessment, they're doing the location of the towers themselves. that there will be considerable thought about the environmental impact of where that cable comes around and where it ties into our current electrical grid.
Sure. So you too can geek out with us at the Wilmington Chamber of Commerce when we talk about offshore wind energy, natural gas, nuclear energy. We like to geek out about infrastructure, and we have a lot of fun while we do it. Thank you again for joining us today. We've enjoyed being with you, and we'll see you again next time on the Wilmington Chamber Podcast.